What? Why are you shaking your head?
You're welcome.
What's going on, guys? Week 1 cashing points. Me, Ryan Heath, Graham Barfield this year. We have a ton to get to, but before we dive in, I wanted to note that, for one, on your screen, you can scan that QR code, use promo code YouTube10 for 10% off. You can also use promo code BetSmart that gives you 15% off an all-in or a premium subscription over at fantasypoints.com. No better time to get in than right now. Easily the best bang for your buck at this point in the year. Graham, how you doing?
Good, dude. I think everybody's going to be tilting this McCaffrey news. Apparently did not practice today. So, yeah, welcome back, football. Might be looking at some Brian Robinson week 1. It's good, though, man. I'm glad that football's back.
Yeah, I certainly am, too. Not so excited about the injury side of things. Ryan, how are you doing after we got that devastating CMC news about 60 seconds before we went live?
Yeah, I mean, it's the second day in a row that we got devastating CMC news, like in the afternoon. I'm just retraining myself to expect it. Yeah, this is what we have to deal with in football season. I just would like them to figure it out and take the pain away, because it's getting constant. I can't do this every day.
Yeah, we will see if the 49ers can figure it out and take the pain away. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Of course, kicking things off with the 1 p.m. slate. Going to start it off with the New York Giants at the Washington Commanders. Giants are 6-point underdogs here. Total is 45.5. On the injury front, Malik Neighbors missed Friday's practice with a back issue. He's expected to play, though. Tackle Andrew Thomas is doubtful for the game with a foot issue. And on the Washington side, Noah Brown is questionable with a knee issue that he's been dealing with all summer. Graham, I'll throw it over to you to start talking Giants. It really only feels to me like Malik Neighbors and Theo Johnson are in play here. Yeah, any thoughts there?
Yeah, I like Neighbors quite a bit. I think at 7K, I talked to you on our early look show earlier this week that I feel like Neighbors is going to be like a 7,500 player on DK. No concern with the injury. I think he's fully off the injury report going into this game. Jaden Daniels obviously projects extremely well. I like a Daniels plus Debo and Neighbors. But yeah, I want no part of this backfield. Theo Johnson is a little interesting as a punt, like you mentioned, 3K. Chris and I have been like the big Theo Johnson bulls for best ball this year, just because, the number 2 target in New York is kind of wide open. It's a little thin. I don't know if I'm going to be playing it, but I do love some Neighbors here in this spot. Great matchup.
Yeah, I'm with you, and don't necessarily need to get to Theo Johnson on a slate like this. A lot of strong tight end options, even in that sort of 3K range. Ryan, curious what sort of matchup notes you're looking at, especially on the Washington side. Jaden Daniels looks like he's going to be the most popular quarterback play on the slate, at least right there with Trevor Lawrence, and I think deservedly so. Yeah, where are you at on these Washington players, given the issues with Noah Brown, Terry McLaurin missing a bunch of camp? It feels like the stack's a little bit more straightforward potentially with a Debo and maybe even a Zach Ertz.
I don't know if it is that straightforward. Like, yes, I agree that maybe McLaurin missing all of camp matters more, but at least from a matchup perspective, this would be more of a Terry McLaurin week. Just based on what I'm seeing, the Giants were very much like a perimeter and a deep funnel last year, which, yeah, that sounds exactly like Terry McLaurin, as opposed to what we would expect Debo to kind of operate around the line of scrimmage. I mean, yeah, 6th most deep yards per game allowed by the Giants last season. Positive schedule adjusted to outside receivers. So I don't know. I think it is kind of interesting if nobody's going to be playing McLaurin, if the field's going to be a little bit scared off, then yeah, I might actually go there, which is, yeah, it's kind of funny because I feel like I was fading Daniels plus McLaurin, that specific stack, every week last year. But yeah, I don't know. It's a new season. This could be, I could be interested this week specifically.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting angle. I'm seeing, 7, 8, 9% projected ownership for McLaurin, so I'm not sure how scared off the field is going to be there. When it comes to Jaden Daniels, I think I'm a lot more interested in Joe Burrow right now, just given where ownership projections are at. But yeah, certainly can't fault anybody for looking at Jaden Daniels this week. Let's move on to Joe Burrow. The Cincinnati Bengals at the Cleveland Browns. Bengals are 5.5 point favorite. This total's got up to 48.5. No major injuries of note. Again, with Joe Burrow, I mean, Higgins and Chase both project remarkably well. The Bengals finally played their starters in the preseason, and this is the first normal offseason of Joe Burrow's career. Graham, can I convince you to load up on any Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins stacks?
Oh, yeah, and I loved your call. I think Daniels will be the chalk. I think he'll probably be 12, 15%. I think we'll see Burrow at like 7 to 10. And yeah, I mean, it's always the same thing with the Bengals, right? Like they start slow every year. Zach Taylor, like just for whatever reason, just hasn't been able to like get his team prepared early in the year. I think that does change. The one thing in this game is Myles Garrett has like basically owned the Bengals for the last couple of years. I mean, schematically, it's a great matchup. Chase and Higgins both have great individual matchups. The Bengals last year, they faced the Browns twice, and in both those games, Jim Schwartz basically didn't play man coverage. So it's going to be a lot of zone underneath stuff, which screams Chase to me. But yeah, Jake, I love Joe Flacco. It's scary how much I love Joe Flacco in this game. So, like, I'm going back and forth with how to play this. Like, yeah, Burrow makes a ton of sense. Love your leverage call. But, like, 4,900 Flacco with Judy plus one of these Bengals, most likely Chase, is probably the way I'm going to play this. Because, like, dude, Flacco, 7 starts with the Browns 2 years ago, averaged over 320 yards per game, never threw for 250 or fewer. Played in the preseason, got the rust off in that third game. I love Flacco at 4,900. I will definitely be going there in tournaments this week. That's for sure.
Yeah, I think the Flacco angle is really interesting here. The other exciting thing about Flacco, I mean, Graham, you noted, Joe Burrow probably 7, 8, 9% owned. Flacco's looking at, probably between 3 and 5% that I'm seeing industry wide. And, when I was running some of our initial projections through SaberSim, without any adjustments, I was getting a ton of Trevor Lawrence, which, he'll be fairly popular, and also a ton of Joe Flacco. Ryan, I'm really curious what your thoughts are on this game. Feels like a great shootout spot. I love both angles of the game stack, whether that's with Flacco or with Burrow. Anything you want to add there?
Yeah, I'm kind of with you. I definitely want to play both sides of this and be very exposed to this game. There's a lot of like historical Browns versus Bengals narratives that I feel like people have been bringing up this week. But yeah, to me, like we haven't had the Joe Burrow, Joe Flacco duel in a while. Like this was a plus 5% pass rate over expectation team with Flacco in 2023. They only have Ford and Sampson in the backfield. Like I really think that both teams are going to come out trying to throw, ready to throw. And yeah, I'm just very positive on this game in general. But yeah, I am going to agree with Graham that I think like the easiest way to fit everything is doing Flacco plus Browns with the Chase bring back. I guess the only other thing I want to say is on the Bengals side, especially if he's projecting for ownership, I might be a little bit scared off of Chase Brown this week, at least in tournaments. The Browns have been a very negative matchup in terms of backfield target share allowed, which is kind of how Brown would totally get there in a shootout scenario. Just generally a rough matchup for opposing running backs. The defensive line is kind of the strength of this team. And if it is Myles Garrett just constantly bringing the pressure as well, I would note that Chase's splits are much better than T. Higgins against pressure over the past couple seasons. So do you think that's another reason to kind of lean into Chase a little bit more than Higgins?
Yeah, I think all that makes a lot of sense. When I've been playing with builds, I think my favorite way to play Chase Brown this week is just with Joe Burrow and hope the Bengals put up 40, 45 points and that this game is a massive shootout. But yeah, I think Chase Brown's probably going to go a tad over-owned here. I'm looking at between 20 and 28% across the board industry wide, and that does feel a bit high on what is a loaded running back slate. Granted, maybe slightly less so if Christian McCaffrey does not play. Only other guy I wanted to throw out here was Cedric Tillman. I think Jerry Jeudy and David Njoku are obviously the best plays with Joe Flacco. Cedric Tillman's still projecting pretty well. He's a top 20 wide receiver value for us, and you're going to be able to get him at 2, 3, 4% ownership. So I think he's an interesting guy to mix in, especially if you're going heavy on this game. A lot of Joe Burrow teams, a lot of Joe Flacco teams. I would not want to forget about Cedric Tillman. Before we move on to this next game, I know tons of start sit questions in the chat. Me and Ryan can get to a lot of those on the Underdog Drafter Party at 6:30. So just keep that in mind. We need to breeze through these games here to try to keep this at around an hour. Moving on to the Pittsburgh Steelers at the New York Jets. This is a gross one. Steelers are favored by 3. Total is 37.5. No major injury notes, excluding Elijah Vera Tucker being lost for the season. This is a tough one to find anybody to like here, Graham. I know you and me talked about Justin Fields a little earlier on the early look. He's got the upside with his legs, but this is a terrible matchup, terrible game environment. This is a team that probably knows him pretty well in the Pittsburgh Steelers. I just don't really see a reason to go to Fields at this point, given how loaded the slate is at quarterback.
Yeah, I just want to play Steelers defense in this game and kind of move it forward. 3,300 for them is a really nice price on DraftKings. And as you said, this team knows Fields very well. I think the Steelers, it's tough. Like I think the Steelers, like Broncos, Seahawks, and probably the Eagles too, even though they've lost some guys, like that's the top 4 defenses to me. And I think the Steelers are going to be awesome. I love the Ramsey trade for them as well. They're going to kind of move him all over the formation. They got Darius Slay to kind of play opposite Joey Porter Jr. Just a really talented defense. And now they got Alex Highsmith back healthy. You missed a bunch of time last year. TJ Watt's running mate. Fields 5,400 feels like a nice price, dude, but like I can't get there. And this is coming from like the resident Justin Fields stan on the site. Like I love Fields and redraft this year, but this is like a worst possible matchup to start the season, especially with no Elijah Vera Tucker.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. If you do want to play Fields, I think, pretty easy single stack there with Garrett Wilson. Not one I'm particularly tempted by. Ryan, any interest in a DK Metcalf, who seems to really be the only guy who's popping on the Steelers side here?
So I kind of get it. I get it for both Metcalf and Garrett Wilson as like very large field contrarian wide receiver plays, but I'm probably just not going to get there with either. The biggest thing with Metcalf to me is, yes, while we could see Aaron Glenn and the Jets play a lot of man coverage, which is what we saw from Glenn with the Lions last year, and we've seen Metcalf be very good against man coverage. The issue to me is just the pass rush here. Per our line matchups tool, this Steelers offensive line is one of the most outmatched of any team this week. That's going to be rough in terms of the deep ball. We saw Aaron Rodgers on the other side of this game last year, or on the other team last year, kind of mitigate that by making his time to throw very quick. But yeah, that just means fewer deep shots, less upside, like no big plays that are going to really make this game worth their time. So that's how I'm mostly looking at it. If I was in like a 150 max, maybe I get to a little bit of Wilson or Metcalf, but other than that, not really into it.
Yeah, I am right there with you. I think we can move on here to the Arizona Cardinals at the New Orleans Saints. Cardinals are 6.5 point favorites. Total here is 43.5. No major injury notes. Graham, I think the running back defense stack that everyone is going to want to play this week is James Conner against the Saints. It's a solid schematic matchup, and obviously massive blowout potential here. And we've seen James Conner absolutely smash and wins.
Yeah, he is an extremely game script dependent running back, like kind of to the similar degree as Derrick Henry. Last year, Conner was the RB6 in games where the Cardinals were favored. And yeah, like you mentioned, the Saints run defense was bottom 5. I mean, this is a probably bottom 3 defense, maybe even bottom 1. Yeah, Conner plus Cardinals D is going to be pretty popular. I get it. I think you can make the argument against Conner simply like he doesn't get a ton of passing down usage on, like that's not great for DK. I also kind of do believe that the Cardinals want to play Trey Benson a little more, and wouldn't you want to do that early in the season to kind of keep him fresh? Really, these are just like kind of nitpicking things because like it really is a great price, great play, 6,100, tons of touchdown upside too. I mean, week 1 favorites are always a little dicey, and I could certainly see the Cardinals being a team that flops like week 1 going into New Orleans. They're 6.5 point favorites, but still like. I mean, it's kind of hard to poke holes in the Conner play besides, the passing down usage.
Yeah. The Cardinals do feel like they could be one of those teams that ruin a lot of survivor picks in week 1. Ryan, I'm curious, are you seeing anything else for this game? Maybe Alvin Kamara can PPR scan his way there, but I don't see a ton of touchdown upside in this Saints offense. Olave and Shaheed are moderately interesting if you assume New Orleans has to throw. What do you think here?
Yeah, I mean that's how I would think about this. Is the Cardinals last year what we saw? They love kind of hanging back in quarters coverage, and they were very much like an underneath funnel. The sixth most yards per game allowed on throws of less than 10 air yards. That's probably what Kellen Moore and the Saints are going to try to do with Rattler, because I think that's really the only way this offense can function. So yeah, that's great in terms of PPR scam stuff for Kamara, maybe even for Rashid Shaheed and Olave from what we saw in their preseason usage. But I just don't think the upside is there for any of those individual pieces for DFS tournaments. But if you're thinking of it that way, maybe that's a reason to fade Connor at ownership if this Saints team surprises us a little bit and is actually a little bit more frisky on offense than we'd expect.
Yeah, I think that's very reasonable. When it comes to Kamara, he's a guy that I think has like a really, really strong median in this game, but the 30-point potential upside, he's going to need some touchdowns to get you there, and that's a little tough to see given the status of the Saints offense in this one. Let's move on to a much more fun game. Tampa Bay Buccaneers at the Atlanta Falcons. No Tristan Wirfs or Chris Godwin for Tampa Bay. On the Atlanta side, Darnell Mooney is questionable with a shoulder injury he suffered in camp after a week of limited practices. This is a really fun one, Graham. Obviously, Baker Mayfield stacks are always in play here. I'm curious what you think when it comes to stacking up Baker. Mike Evans is obviously a mainstay in Baker stacks. Emeka Egbuka is priced really well and projects as a solid value across the industry. I know something Johnny Proctor always talks about is that, these week one rookie wide receivers generally go over-owned and almost always underperform. And then there's also Cade Otton, who, did stand out a bit when the Buccaneers were missing pieces last season. What do you think about Baker stacks here?
So yeah, I think Igbuka is going to be top 5 in ownership, maybe top 3. I think we'll see BTJ at the top, and then it'll be kind of flat. I expect Igbuka to push for 20%. And to me, yeah, he's a good play. The price point's awesome, but I want Mike Evans on all of my teams. Like 6,600 for this guy who's veteran, early in the season, was our number 1 separator by ass last season. So showed no signs of falling off, has 2 touchdown upside in this spot. Falcons have a good pass rush, man. It's a little bit of a concern with no Wirfs, but their corners stink. AJ Terrell is not a concern at all for Evans. Brett was noting on our matchup point show on Wednesday that he really likes the matchup for Igbuka in the slot. So yeah, I mean, Baker, while we have to bake in some regression for him, I mean, he had a 7% touchdown rate. That's going to come down. The same time, man, Evans, Egbuka, the target should consolidate around these two. And if Evans is only 12 to 15% ownership, I think he's the best receiver play on the slate.
Yeah. I mean, certainly up there. I definitely have a lot of interest in Mike Evans at those ownership numbers. Ryan, Michael Penix in his 3 starts last year, Atlanta scored 32 points per game. That certainly makes this pretty tempting. We also saw Tampa Bay's offense look pretty vulnerable through the air. What are you seeing on the Atlanta side of this game?
Yeah, I like the Atlanta side of this game about as much as Graham, it sounds likes the Tampa Bay side of this game. I think this game in general is amazing. But yeah, the Bucs last year were the most extreme pass funnel in the league. We saw them play cover 3 at the NFL's highest rate. Todd Bowles is back, obviously. They blitzed at the NFL's highest rate. All of that schematic stuff is really good news for Michael Penix. He was about 84% more efficient against zone last year, 21% against cover 3. Basically everything is lining up here for Penix to have a really big day. And I think it's pretty easy to stack him as well. Drake London is going to push for some of the highest ownership on the slate, but rightfully so. All of those schematic things help him as well. And with Penix last year in his 3 games, 13 targets per game and over 117 yards per game, over 24 fantasy points per game, just insane production. Darnell Mooney is also really sneaky and kind of fun. He was up at 2.4 yards per outrun against the blitz last year, which is a nice little boost there for him as well, assuming he plays. So yeah, Penix is going to be one of my bigger stands, especially if he comes in under-owned relative to a guy like Trevor Lawrence. I think this is one of the better spots on the slate to attack and go really heavy on the game stacks.
Yeah, I absolutely love that call. If Darnell Mooney doesn't go, Ray McLeod is going to pop as a pretty decent value across the board. That'll be another way to just bring down your cumulative spend on any sort of Penix or Baker Mayfield teams, because if you're pairing up Mike Evans and Drake London, that is going to be a fairly expensive stack there, but certainly a worthwhile one. And then, Ryan, any love for Bijan Robinson here? I was leaning a lot more toward Christian McCaffrey 24 hours ago. I still think there are better options in the 6K range, but I think Bijan, especially within the context of game stacks, could go absolutely nuclear here, right?
Yeah, I think he's almost like a better leverage play, just because we saw Atlanta last year in a lot of games. They were like, okay, we're going to take the load off of Penix, or even off of an injured Cousins. We're just going to hammer it with Bijan. I think for this game to go the way we want it to, then Bijan is probably not hitting a ceiling outcome just in terms of volume. But I mean, if you want to play it the other way with Bijan, I think you can. So that's more how I would look at it.
Yeah, certainly think that's reasonable. One thing I'm trying to do a little bit more this year is forcing a bit more running back, same team running back with quarterback in my game stacks. It's obviously thin, but you need those 0.1 percentile outcomes where teams score 40 plus points, and I think you could get that here potentially with Atlanta and just get a ton of touchdowns across the board. Let's move on to the Miami Dolphins at the Indianapolis Colts. Dolphins are 1.5 point underdogs. Total here is 47.5. No Darren Waller for Miami. Ryan, can I interest you in any Daniel Jones here? I understand that, he's not necessarily a very good player, or at least that's the widely regarded view, but maybe there's a Geno Smith type season somewhere in him with Shane Steichen coordinating the offense. Plenty of offensive weapons here. This is also a good game environment, and this Miami defense could be pretty bad. What are your thoughts on the Colts side of things?
Yeah, I think Jones is like a technical value might be the term. I mean, before his ACL tear, both seasons, he was up at a 9.5% scramble rate. For perspective, that would have been behind only Jaden Daniels and Drake May last year, up at 17.6 fantasy points per game in his healthy games through 2022 and 2023. We have seen Shane Steichen kind of make the designed run game for the quarterback a big point of emphasis in his offenses. So I do think there's something here. Yeah, Jones priced as the QB 20. He's a technical value, but I don't know if the ceiling is entirely there. I don't know. It's very much going to be like an ownership play for me. I think I'm more interested in the weapons in this game. Josh Downs, you have going up against the Dolphins, starting a day 3 rookie at nickel corner, which just is very, very exciting to me. And Jonathan Taylor as well. I mean, you get the Colts here as favorites. Last year in games that the Colts, or over the past 2 seasons in games the Colts won, Jonathan Taylor is averaged over 23 DK fantasy points per game, over 120 rushing yards per game. I think it's gone a little underreported how awesome of a spot this is for Jonathan Taylor specifically. All of his splits without Anthony Richardson last year were amazing as well in terms of the passing game usage too. So yeah, that's I think the biggest point here is just the Colts weapons as opposed to Jones.
Yeah, no, I think you're spot on there. I thought my pitch for Jones sounded pretty good, but when you realize that across the industry is looking at 9, 10, 11% ownership for the projection, right behind Lawrence, right behind Jade Daniels, that's a much tougher pill to swallow. And I'm right there with you. This is a fantastic spot for Jonathan Taylor, another great spot for Josh Downs. And I think you could argue for a Michael Pittman too at just 4,900. Graham, what about the Miami side here? I think you can always make an argument for Miami, just given how explosive their weapons are in tournaments. There's a huge range of outcomes on a guy like Tyreek Hill. A year ago in week 1, a 6,700 Tyreek Hill would have been pushing for 25% ownership. This year, we don't feel too good about it. Where are you at on Miami? And I think Tyreek Hill specifically, he's one of the more interesting guys to talk about here.
Yeah, so I straight up prefer Jalen Waddle at their price points. We've got a number of data points here, like Tyreek's separation score metrics were worse than Waddle's in their games with Tua last year. I believe they played 9 games with Tua. You look at Miami always faces a lot of too high just because defenses want to keep everything in front of them with these guys. And Waddle averaged more yards per route run, 2.0 versus Hill's 1.5 against too high last year. The Colts have a new defensive coordinator, Lou Anarumo. He's coming from your Bengals, Jake. And he faced Miami, I think it was 3 years ago, and he played too high like 70% of the time. To me, this all screams Devon Achane, actually. Achane is off the injury report. Let's go. Calf is not a problem. He is 6,900. I told you on last week, Jake, when we were recording early look, like if Achane's off the injury report and getting full practices in, I'm going to jam Achane. I still feel the same way. Like, Colts run defense was just middling last year. They're going to face a bunch of too high looks. That's going to kind of open up the box for some explosive for Achane. And that's how you get back to getting some more one high coverages. You have a good run game that kind of forces the defense to take note. I want to say real quick, I got to shout out my guy, Jonathan Taylor. Like, I love Achane in this game. I almost love JT as much. I think he's probably going to be like, what do you think, Jake? Like 12-15% with Chase Brown drawing ownership. Achane's going to drop 20+%. Obviously, we probably won't have McCaffrey be super chalky, but Jonathan Taylor has like break the slate upside at 6,800. Ryan, you kind of noted it, but last year when the Colts were favored, it was only 5 or 6 times. He averaged nearly 140 rushing yards per game. Top 5 offensive line, small quarterback upgrade, slight favorites. Miami has a decent run defense, but I mean, JT is a threat to take, basically any carry to the house. I love JT as like I wouldn't say he's a contrarian play, but he's going to be lighter owned than some of these other running backs in the 6K range.
Yeah, I was building a lot of teams earlier in the week, maybe at 10 or 12 that I felt good about. A lot of those, probably 70%, had Christian McCaffrey. I'm going to be swapping plenty of McCaffrey to Devon Achane and Jonathan Taylor. There are some fantastic running back plays in this game. I do have a little bit of interest in Tyreek Hill at 6,700. I think especially for like 150 sets, having a little Tyreek Hill exposure makes some sense. Obviously could be washed. And then my only other note on Jalen Waddle is that he's really popping on FanDuel. I believe 5,500 over on FanDuel. So really strong value over on FanDuel for Jalen Waddle. And I believe that just about covers it for this game. Let's move on to the Las Vegas Raiders at the New England Patriots. Raiders are 2.5-point underdogs. Total here is 44.5. No Christian Gonzalez for New England. It looks like Will Campbell is questionable. Graham, I'll throw it over to you. What are your thoughts on Ashton Genty here for the Raiders? They sort of have a pretty standard big three where I don't think most people aren't looking to stack up the Raiders, but all of Genty, Jacoby Myers, Brock Bowers project reasonably well to the point that you could justify them in a lot of different tournament builds. What are your thoughts on Genty here?
So I loved Genty and season long, had him ahead of Christian McCaffrey. This spot scares me to death, though. On the road, man, the Patriots run defense is going to be so much better this year. Like, it's not just the coaching upgrade with Vrabel, right? Like, Vrabel coached incredibly competitive run defenses with the Titans. They're going to get Christian Barmore back, which is huge. He missed pretty much all of last season, and Barmore is one of the best run defenders in the NFL. $7K for Genty, it's the right price, especially for what this role will be. But we just got through talking through some absolute dogs like JT, great play, Achane, great play, Chase Brown, 6,600 is a great play. So I think the way I want to play this is like, if Brock Bowers is sub 10%, which I think that's what he's going to project towards, with Kittle at 58, some pretty decent values, David Njoku on a little lower down the board. This Christian Gonzalez thing is like sneaky, kind of nice for Bowers because Bowers is not a tight end. He's a receiver who's going to be playing all over the field for them. And I would imagine he would have seen a lot of Christian Gonzalez, not like a shadow situation by any means, but the Patriots don't have a corner now to really do much of anything against Bowers. And, to me, this game is like, I know the Patriots are only 2.5-point favorites, but I really like the Patriots in this spot. Just think they're the better overall team. And trailing game script for Bowers at probably sub 10% ownership with kind of everybody looking to pay into the mid or low range with tight end. I love Bowers here.
Yeah, I think this is a really, really interesting spot for Bowers. At his price tag, he's competing with wide receivers. Price is the wide receiver 9
Yep.
on this slate. But if you exclude the games where Desmond Ritter, who is, one of the worst quarterbacks we've seen in the last 5 years,
Yeah,
threw
you
10
got to
or
get
more
that in there.
passes, Bowers averaged 9.5 targets per game and 79 receiving yards per game among slate eligible receivers. That ranked third best and sixth best. So definitely some value there on Bowers. Only note that I wanted to add on Genty is that similar to Jalen Waddle, much, much better play over on FanDuel, where I believe Genty's only 6,400. Just way too cheap over on FanDuel. Ryan, curious what matchups you're seeing in this game. Any interest in the New England side here?
Not really any interest in the New England side aside from Drake May. And I would almost look at him kind of as more of a one-off. He's just very hard to stack. I don't feel great about the volume that any of these New England receivers are going to individually see. But yeah, I mean, May at 5,500, when we have heard from the team that he's very likely to have more designed running implemented this year. We saw Josh McDaniels run Cam Newton 9.1 rush attempts per game back in 2020. Like this could be more so than like Justin Fields. This is like the one-off mobile QB that I would be interested in on the slate. But yeah, it's just hard because of the stacking situation. I'll have a lot of May over in Underdog Battle Royale, which we'll probably discuss after the show.
Yeah, love that call. Personally, I think on DK, I'll be stacking May up a decent bit with either Steph Diggs or Hunter Henry. Both of those guys are reasonable enough values that I think you can justify it. Both project okay. Hunter Henry in particular was a guy that May really locked on to last year. So yeah, fine with both those guys as a May stacking partner. Don't think I have anything else for this one. Let's get to a really fun one to round out the 1 p.m. slate here. Carolina Panthers at the Jacksonville Jaguars. Panthers are 3.5 point underdogs. Total here is 46.5. Everybody healthy in this one. Ryan, I'll throw it over to you first. I feel like this is a big matchups game just because both defenses were so terrible last year. What's standing out to you from that perspective?
Yeah, as you said, both defenses were terrible last year. I'll start on like the Jacksonville side of that, where I would just give a little word of caution. New defensive coordinator, Anthony Campanelli. They've made some upgrades to their secondary. I don't think this is like necessarily going to be one of the worst secondaries in the NFL this year, which I don't know, makes me kind of look sideways a little bit at the Ted McMillan ownership. I get it. I do think McMillan's amazing. He should immediately command like a 25 to a 30% target share. But yeah, if the field's on him, it just makes me a little bit less excited. More excited to attack the other side of this game, though. I think the Jaguars passing game is a really interesting bet. So for anyone that's been following my work over the offseason, I've pretty much come to the conclusion that Liam Cohen is immediately just crowned as the best play caller in the NFL. Whether that translates to Jacksonville, we're going to have to see. But yeah, the Panthers, this is the perfect matchup for it with a returning defensive coordinator, played a ton of cover 3 last year. And that is great for Trevor Lawrence based on his splits, as is the Panthers' lack of a pass rush. But it also becomes interesting for kind of the tertiary guys on this Jaguars offense. Diami Brown and Brenton Strange both have insanely positive matchups against what the Panthers like to do. They're guys I don't want to forget about in GPPs in terms of mixing them into these heavy game stacks. I think they are viable. But obviously that's burying the lead. Brian Thomas Jr., one of the best plays on the slate. He's unbelievable. Travis Hunter is really fun from just a game theory perspective, where none of his industry projections are going to accurately show his actual range of outcomes because we just don't know how much he's going to play. That's the type of spot that I want to attack in week 1 DFS. So yeah, I'm going to be incredibly overweight on basically everybody in this Jaguars passing game. And the only other thing that I want to say in this game is, if I'm wrong, if the Jaguars aren't deservedly the favorites here, if the other side of this game kind of plays out and it's a grinded out type of thing, then Chuba Hubbard is the best leverage play of the slate. Over the last 2 seasons, 100 rushing yards per game, over 21 fantasy points per game in wins. He had the best expected fantasy points per game average in his wins last year under Dave Canales. So yeah, just a lot of really awesome angles here. And I think this is the game I'm going to spend the most time on in the optimizer.
Yeah. Same here for me. Love that Travis Hunter call. We're going to find out everything we need to know about Travis Hunter after this week 1 game. People are going to be pretty scared to click on a guy who might play 55% of the snaps on offense and another 70 or so percent on defense. I mean, who really knows? We just have no idea. And that makes it pretty exciting because if he is out there for, say, an 85% route share, I mean, this could very easily be a 25 fantasy point performance from a guy like Travis Hunter at only 5K and only right around 5% ownership, and that feels pretty great. Graham, anything to add on this game? I think this is just a really, really fun game to stack.
Yeah, Ryan covered pretty much all of it. I fully agree with his Chuba call. That was going to be the one kind of contrarian play into this game I was going to bring up. Like, guys, the Jags have the worst defensive line in football, and probably like it's not even close. Like by far the least talented defensive interior in football. That's just kind of sets up really well for Hubbard. And he's going to be like 5% owned. It's kind of a similar play to James Conner, like where you have a play that, like, yeah, he's not a great pass catcher. He's not super involved on passing downs. They'll mix in some Dowdle. They'll mix in some ETN on passing downs, maybe a little bit, but like they're both the same price on DraftKings, basically. Conner 61, Chuba 6K. And I mean, Chuba's going to be, maybe an eighth of that ownership. And yeah, I think we do know, Jake, what's going to happen with Travis Hunter. He's going to play receiver full time. Like Cohen kind of let it slip in a radio interview this offseason. They're saying, oh, we're still kind of planning, what Hunter's role is going to be like. They're not. You're trying to save Trevor Lawrence's career, and you're not going to play De'Ami Brown and Parker Washington and Tim Patrick like full-time snaps. Like I'm seeing it as like Hunter is going to be 70%, 80% route share to start the season. And he's going to play like a little bit on defense. He's 5K. And this is going to be the cheapest he'll be all year. It'll probably be the lowest ownership he'll be all year. Like BTJ, I'm fully with Ryan. Like great play. But Travis Hunter at 5K is just staring me in the face right now. Like that's just, he's looking like an awesome leverage play at easily sub 10% ownership.
Yeah, if I had to throw out a single flag plant for the slate, I think it would be Travis Hunter. He is a guy that I'm going to be way overweight on relative to the field. Notice a couple comments, and this was a guy that I was going to, wrap things up with about Bryce Young. I actually think Bryce Young is a pretty good play here. Obviously, we're sort of itching for a shootout in the scenario where we play Bryce Young. But 26.8 DraftKings fantasy points per game in his final 3 games last season. And we know that his stacking partner, Tet McMillan, is a fantastic play in his own right. I think he's a pretty easy guy to stack. I like Bryce plus Chuba plus Tet, can run it back with Hunter, can run it back with BTJ. And then, of course, with Trevor Lawrence, very easy to keep his ownership down. He'll probably be the second most popular quarterback on the slate behind Jaden Daniels by playing him with some of the guys that Ryan mentioned, a Daimi Brown, a Brent Strange, or Travis Hunter. All of those guys will help reduce your Trevor Lawrence lineup ownership. All right, let's move on to the 4 p.m. slate. We'll start things off here with the Tennessee Titans at the Denver Broncos. Titans are 8.5-point underdogs here. Total is 42.5. Ryan, I'm curious what you're seeing here on the Tennessee side. Tony Pollard's projecting pretty well. Calvin Ridley's a guy who I would probably be excited to play in just about any other matchup, but he's looking at a Patrick Surtain shadow. Chigo Konkwu is very interesting. What do you think here?
Yeah, so I'll start with Ridley, which is like he's one where I would get it, but kind of unlike Garrett Wilson and unlike DK Metcalf, it seems like he's going to pull at least a little bit of ownership. So that kind of just ruins my interest there. Pollard, I can't really do it with him either. I mean, this is a 7.5 point spread. Pollard averaged only 11.5 fantasy points per game in losses last season, whereas he was over 20 fantasy points per game in wins. Yeah, he is somewhat game script sensitive, even with Tajay Spears out. I just don't really want to bet on Tennessee to be able to move the ball a whole lot in this matchup. Like, it's a really tough pressure matchup as well. Broncos versus this Titans offensive line. They have had some upgrades to it in the offseason, but I don't know if it's going to be enough in this spot. But yeah, I mean, in future weeks, I expect I'll be more on Pollard and Ridley.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Chigo Okonkwo is a guy who I know Scott Barrett is going to end up hyping up a lot in his slate breakdown. I know one of the premier Titans insiders told Scott that Chig is, at least early in the season, going to function as the number 2 pass catcher for the Titans. And, at 3,400, we saw Chig look pretty good at the end of last season. And especially with Calvin Ridley pulling that Surtain shadow, I think we could see some pretty good volume for Chig here. He's probably one of my favorite, honestly, my favorite, like 3K-ish tight end this week. Graham, curious if you have anything else to add on this game on either the Denver side or just overall.
Pollard in 4 games without Tajay Spears played on 87% of the snaps and was the RB1 by expected fantasy points per game. And he's 5,700, and I have no interest in playing him. It's kind of sad. It's like, man, this is the exact type of play I feel like we always make here at Fantasy Points. Like we're volume whores on this site, and Pollard is going to be like the ultimate volume whore to open this season. But yeah, it's like Broncos run defense was just nails last season. I think they're going to be even better this year. Cam Ward's first start on the road at Mile High, it's just a brutal spot. I don't have much from this game, to be honest with you, man. I think the Broncos just kind of roll them. They're just the significantly better team, and it's kind of sucks because I don't really have much from the Broncos side either. Like, it'll be a split with this backfield to start the season. Cortland Sutton's just the right price, and it's the same thing with the Broncos as always. They're going to have their rotation at receiver. Evan Ingram's 4,500. I think I'd just rather play Njoku even into ownership. Njoku with Flacco. That scam is going to be feeding families to start the season. But I do like Ingram just a little bit more than most projections do. I don't know if he's like the full-time 80% route share player he was with the Jags, but I think he's very clearly going to be their number 2 target.
Yeah, certainly like that shout there. Only other guy that I wanted to throw out, and this is pretty much exclusively a 4 p.m. only call, a little bit of Marvin Mims feels good for like a 4 p.m. only slate where he'll probably be 5, 6, 7% owned and can obviously put up a monster score, especially if you extrapolate. If you extrapolate anything with Marvin Mims, he'll average maybe 30 or 40 fantasy points per game. All right, I think that just about does it for this one. Let's move on to the 49ers at Seahawks. 49ers are a 1.5 are favored by 1.5. Total here is 43.5. Obviously, big note is on Christian McCaffrey. Graham, you just dropped in our private chat. CMC himself says that he will play. Graham, I'll ask you, how comfortable do you feel with Christian McCaffrey given this sort of weird injury stuff? Based on what I understand about, Achilles tendonitis and calf strains, it's sort of a chronic thing that just has to be constantly managed. And that makes me think that they're just playing it very, very cautious with their best player. If he's going to play, he's going to be out there, right?
Yeah, but I do think you have to kind of ding the floor and ceiling a little bit. Like, yeah, it's early in the season, man. They've got a week 14 bye. They have playoff aspirations for sure. There's a chance that we don't get full on bell cow McCaffrey. Maybe he's at 65, 70%. Not practicing today on Friday is just like, it is a huge red flag for any player. Obviously, the McCaffrey quote is like pretty bullish though. And Scott put this in our Discord chat, but he was basically saying that like, I'm fully aware of like the injury history I have. Sometimes things get kind of blown out of proportion. He says he feels fine. This to me is like, it's tricky. Like if we get a Schefter report Saturday night that McCaffrey is like full go, then I'll probably just be back to where I was. But for right now, I'm a little worried. I'm not going to lie. And Jake, I brought this up to you on earlier this week is like, I kind of want to run some Purdy doubles. Like I feel like nobody's on Purdy at 6,200. Seattle is going to be one of the top secondaries in the league, but like if McCaffrey is a little less than 100%, should shift their pass rate up a little bit. Kittle's 5,800. He's 700 cheaper than Bowers. the main play I really want to play here is Ricky Pearsall. Juwan Jennings, the whole contract thing did get settled over $3 million in incentives. It's like, okay, my guy. I guess he probably just didn't want to, show up to training camp. But Pearsall looked awesome, like on tape to close out last season. His last couple of games, he looked phenomenal. Niners will move him around to kind of get him off of Reek Woolen. I love him. I think Pearsall is like a really, really strong play at 4,500. Emeka Egbuka is going to be probably twice as owned, and I'm not sure that's right. I think it should be pretty close between these two guys. Is among the top owned plays on this slate. I don't know if Pearsall is like break the slate upside. He's kind of going to be that 6, 7, 8 target guy this season, but I see a little bit of hidden upside in this spot simply because Juwan Jennings has not practiced all of August.
Yeah, no, I think Pearsall's a great call. He's certainly one of my favorite plays, especially sub 5K at wide receiver. I also think Kittle has a lot of merit in this game. I think the easiest Purdy double stack is with Kittle and Pearsall, but especially if you're playing a lot of Purdy, which I think is a pretty good idea given that he's at 4 or 5% ownership across the board right now. I don't mind mixing in some Juwan, and certainly don't mind mixing in some CMC. Ryan, I'm curious, any other thoughts on the 49ers side? I kind of like the idea of playing Christian McCaffrey still. If he's out there, I really think he's going to be close to a full go. Maybe they tweak their pass rate a little bit, but this also probably brings down his ownership, all these injury concerns. What do you think on McCaffrey and just more broadly the Niners here?
Yeah, I am kind of with you in that I would play it in terms of I know that we can't talk normally about Christian McCaffrey in the fantasy football industry, especially including how we were talking at the beginning of the show. So yeah, I think that is going to be reflected in the ownership percentage, and I just want to take advantage of that and attack that. I mean, McCaffrey's at 24.4 fantasy points per game in wins over the past 2 seasons. That's RB1 on the slate. You had a really good note in Slate Breakdown that the last time McCaffrey was as cheapy as he is on DraftKings this week, it was in week 2 of 2018. Like, the workload can be just insane. I want to lean into the ceiling outcome here, but I am fully with you in terms of Purdy as well. He has always kind of been a guy that gets forgotten on a lot of these slates. But yeah, if anybody can pull 3 or 4 touchdowns out as a surprise, like it out of 4% ownership, it is totally Brock Purdy. I think you can play him with CMC. I really like the George Kittle call. He's been insane without Debo, without Ayuk over his career, which is what we were kind of hammering all offseason, talking about all summer on Best Ball Breakdown with you and me, Graham. So yeah, I think this is a really appealing spot for the offense overall. And yeah, I kind of want a lot of all of them.
Yeah, no, I think those are great calls. Really love loading up on the 49ers. The one bullish note that I will give on Juwan Jennings is that after him and Pearsall, this wide receiver room is a joke. It's MVS, it's Russell Gage. It's guys you've never heard of who will probably be in my UFL spreadsheets this spring. So I think Juwan Jennings will be out there. I don't necessarily know if they'll make him a focal point. We know Kyle Shanahan can and will put guys in the doghouse. But that is the one note that I have on Juwan Jennings is that he's too good to not play, assuming he knows the plays and is good to go in that regard. If we're all interested in Brock Purdy, Graham, who do you think is the best run back on the Seattle side? I think there's a lot of merit to both Kenneth Walker and JSN, and dare I say even Cooper Kupp maybe too?
Yeah, Ken Walker to me is definitely the best run back on Seattle. 5,900. He has more passing down upside than Connor and Chuba Hubbard. We've seen, now it'll be 3 different coaching staffs with Kubiak kind of give him that workhorse role. And this is a great schematic matchup. Yeah, like the Niners have a new defensive coordinator, Robert Saleh's back. They have a new defensive line, pretty much all new interior. This was like one of the worst defenses against outside zone last year in terms of their success rate allowed, their yards per carry allowed. And this is the healthiest that Ken Walker is going to be all year. Again, he's just 5,900. If I'm running Purdy doubles, which I probably will have a team or 2 with Purdy, Pearsall, and Kittle, I think you play it with Walker and you hope that Seattle is just like a lot better than what we're projecting. Ken Walker has, I mean, he's got 25, 30 point upside in this spot, and he's sub 6K. Ryan, what did you find with the Seattle passing game? Because I'll be honest, I'm really struggling with the Seattle passing game and how to like kind of break it down.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, Graham.
No, I mean, I am as well. So
yeah.
like the biggest thing with Kubiak has always been, at least in the passing game, the biggest thing with Kubiak is that his backfields are awesome, and that his RB1 over the last four since 2021 has only been second to Christian McCaffrey in expected fantasy points per team play. So yeah, fully with you on Walker. I think he's the best run back. But yeah, in terms of the passing game, it's been like the play action deep shots that we have seen the most production out of his receivers for. And yeah, that's really tough. I don't think that's Cooper Kupp at this point in his career. Maybe that's JSN, that he was kind of had more of a vertical presence in college. Haven't really seen that in the NFL. I don't know. Is it like, it feels like it should be illegal to say the name Torrey Horton in week 1 of DFS, but like that is kind of the conclusion I came to in the offseason. So yeah, I don't know. I think the real answer is probably just I'm not that interested in any of these receivers, and I'm just going to play Walker as all my bringbacks. But that's like what I'd be looking for. I don't even know Torrey Horton's price, if I'm being fully honest, but that's something to consider possibly.
Stone men on Torrey Horton. 3K.
3K Torrey Horton. I don't think you can convince me to go there.
Yeah.
I have a little bit of love for JSN. I'm with you guys, though. K Walker is the best run back here. My one thing on Cooper Kupp is that I could see him being like an 18 fantasy point per game guy for like 4 or 5 weeks before he totally falls off the map. And I think if you're going to play a guy like Cooper Kupp, who obviously has a pretty lengthy injury history and is pretty old, I don't mind doing that early in the year when he's a fairly reasonable 5,300 too. But I get that it's not particularly sexy, and that obviously Kenneth Walker has that big play upside on his side. Let's move on to what I think will probably be the most interesting game of the 4 p.m. slate. Detroit Lions at the Green Bay Packers. Lions are 2.5 point underdogs here. Total is 47.5. Main injury to keep an eye on here is Jaden Reed. He's dealing with a Jones fracture. I think he'll play. Who knows how effective he'll be. He said it's largely a pain tolerance thing. Ryan, I'll throw it over to you. What sort of matchups are you seeing in this game? I know you and me have talked extensively about Jahmyr Gibbs. I think you have a really interesting game theory angle there. Give us your thoughts.
Yeah, I'll start with the game theory angle on Gibbs, and that is pretty simply, if we see the Lions come out in week 1 after Gibbs completely put the team on his back over the last 4 games of last season without David Montgomery and was amazing, and they just say, hey, let's give Gibbs some more snaps. He's the best running back in the league. We should give him just a little bit more of the workload, like a 60 to 70% opportunity share instead of 49% that he was at last year. If that happens, then he can completely smash and be the best play of the slate at incredibly low ownership compared to a lot of these running backs. So I'm pretty into that angle. I'm also, for Detroit, into the angle of, if we do get a negative game script with them, as this spread is implying, that has historically been awesome for this offense. I mean, Gibbs himself gets up to a 63% snap share while trailing in 2024. So that's great for Gibbs, potentially. It's great for Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jameson Williams. I mean, both of those guys averaged over 50 routes per game in the Lions' only 2 losses last year, compared to 26 per game in their other games. So if they are kind of forced to play fast and to throw the ball, then it's pretty exciting. Matchup wise, I lean even a little bit more into Amon-Ra and into Gibbs. The Packers have been a lot more of an underneath and slot type of funnel, at least last year, that we saw with their returning defensive coordinator. So yeah, those are kind of my big guys there. I think the really hard part, as we were talking about a little this morning, is just what you do on the other side of this game in terms of how do we get there where the Packers are up and the Lions are down? Who's actually scoring on the Packers side? But yeah, I'll throw that over to you guys.
Yeah, that's I do think that's a really tough call, and I think that's a large part of why you're not going to see much ownership on this game at all. I mean, industry wide, I'm looking at Jordan Love right around 3%, Jared Goff at 1 to 2%. So if you want to game stack this game, you're going to get huge ownership leverage. And I do think there's a lot of juice. Graham, though, I'll throw it to you. Where are you looking on the Packers side? The one guy who's projecting for double-digit ownership in this game is Josh Jacobs. We can feel pretty confident in his workload. Everyone else, though, feels like they have, some holes, some maybe playing time question marks. Where are you at on the Packers side of this game?
This is going to be one of the few games I feel like we're going to get all year where we actually have few playing time concerns, because Jaden Reed is basically not practiced. He's, like you said, dealing with the foot injury. Christian Watson obviously is going to be on IR for the first 4 games, kind of condenses things with just Dobbs and Golden and Kraft. My favorite play on the Packers side is Tucker Kraft, though. Lions were not good against they were really good against tight ends last year. However, Tucker Kraft is one of these guys. He's kind of like yards after catch, not as smooth as a route runner as George Kittle. Like, he's not as like quick in and out of his breaks, but like if there is a Kittle kind of clone in the league right now, it looks like Tucker Kraft to me, a guy who can block, play full time. I think Kraft probably actually leads this team in routes this season. It'll be him or Romeo Dobbs, and he's just 4K. I like Kraft quite a bit. Like I said, the Lions were a very good team against tight ends last season, so it's not like just a breakout matchup. I just want to throw some more fuel in the fire on Jahmyr Gibbs. Like, we've been talking about contrarian plays, like how to get off the chalk at running back, how to get off the McCaffrey chalk, how to get off the Achane chalk. Like, to me, it's Jahmyr Gibbs, and it's not really close. Like, on our site right now, Darren Manser, our projections guy, has Gibbs projected for 7% ownership. He's 7,700. Ryan, you made some great notes about, Gibbs and trailing game scripts. The Packers last year gave up the 5th most receiving yards to opposing backfields. Like, super bullish note. The only thing in his profile, obviously, is, Montgomery getting the inside 5 carries. But, I mean, Gibbs was just as good in terms of his success rate, converting those inside 5 carries. Maybe it does even out just a little bit more this year. I mean, Gibbs has 35, 40-point DK upside. It's his, 95th percentile range of outcome. And again, he's going to be just probably 7-8%. He's going to come in less ownership than Bijan. So I absolutely love Gibbs in tournaments.
Yeah. I think Ryan and Graham, you guys have really sold me on Gibbs here. It's a really strong spot, and I'm definitely with you on the Tucker Kraft call. He's probably my favorite player on the Packers. I have a little bit of interest in Matthew Golden, a little bit in Romeo Dobbs if I'm game stacking here. But overall, I just think this is a fantastic game to stack because no one's going to go that direction. Playing a quarterback plus another 3-4 players from this game, it's going to give you a ton of leverage on the field if this game ends up being a shootout, which it absolutely could. Final game here. Houston Texans at the Los Angeles Rams. Texans are 3-point underdogs. Total here is 43.5. Big injury news is that Christian Kirk is out. Graham, I don't have a ton to love in this game. I think, you could certainly convince me on Puka Nacua and Devontae Adams. What are you seeing here?
So the Rams have one of the best defensive lines in football. It's like top 5 in my mind. They're deep. Jared Verse is going to be a defensive player of the year candidate this year. I actually picked him to be the defensive player of the year. This team is going to be awesome. And it's against the Texans offensive line that is 32nd by our rankings. Scott DiBenedetto put together offensive line rankings, and he put them in the last tier. And I talked to him, and he was basically like, yeah, if I could put them 33rd, I would have. It's a pretty much terrible opening matchup for Stroud. That being said, though, no Christian Kirk. We've got 2 rookies in Xavier Hutchinson, and Nico can break the slate just like anybody. Nico, obviously, we love him as a deep threat, but he also gets a ton of scheme targets around the line of scrimmage, and that's kind of the way I'm seeing it. Like, how do you beat this pass rush? How do you beat what they can do and how they're going to be able to disrupt this game? Well, you get the ball out of Stroud's hands really quickly, and Nico, I don't think he's going to be that owned, man. Like, I think he's going to be sub 10%. I think Puka will draw more ownership. Malik Neighbors certainly will. Obviously, Chase will. Nico has break the slate upside, and again, probably under 10% ownership. I mean, he's been like a locked in wide receiver 1, in games with CJ Stroud for 30 straight games now. And again, just 7,400, I feel like is a nice price for him.
Yeah, I certainly have some interest in some Nico Puka, Nico Devontae Adams.
Yeah.
double stacks or mini stacks in this game. Ryan, where are you at on this game? I don't think it's a particularly exciting one to, stack up on the whole, but there might be some smaller angles here.
Yeah, first I'll say I agree on Nico. Like, his against pressure splits weren't like as bad as you might expect, because I think they just kind of got used to being like, yeah, Stroud is not going to have time in the pocket and we're going to build our offense around that, especially at the end of last year. So yeah, he can definitely break the slate like that. That's not one I'm shying away from this week. But I guess my favorite kind of angle here is, yeah, with that in mind, why not Kyren plus Rams D here? I mean, looking back at the last couple years, when we get the Rams favored in these kind of lower total games, Kyren Williams averages over 25 DraftKings fantasy points. So it is a decent angle to me that it's like, yeah, Sean McVay loves to feed Kyren Williams. If we've learned anything over the last couple of years, when he can do that and kind of grind out a game, he will. So yeah, that's like the only real note I have here, aside from, yeah, just the obvious of Nico and Puka are really good and could score a lot of fantasy points any given week.
Yeah, I love that Kyren Williams shout. We were easily, we had our projections meeting this morning. We're easily the highest in the industry on Kyren. And, I was with Chris Wecht when he said it. I think Kyren's going to be a bell cow until McVay proves us otherwise. And, this is another one of those sort of like week one game theory spots where, the projection just isn't quite there for Kyren to really pop in optimizer and simulations. But like Ryan said, I mean, it makes a lot of sense. If this ends up being a pretty big win in Los Angeles' favor, Kyren Williams and the Rams defense could both look pretty good here. And yeah, McVay does love to grind it out. That does it, guys, for the week one edition of Cashing Points. A couple notes before we get out of here. First one, of course, is that promo code BetSmart gives 15% off an all-in subscription over at fantasypoints.com. Also, I noticed, like I said, plenty of start-sit questions in the chat. Me and Ryan will have plenty of time to get to those during the Underdog Drafter Party. We're going to crack open a few beers, draft some Underdog Battle Royale teams, just talk some ball, have a good time. Plenty of chat interaction during that show. That kicks off in about 25 minutes at 6:30 Eastern time. So definitely catch us there, and I will see all of you guys at the top of the leaderboards.
What? Why are you shaking your head?
You're welcome.